Hello pilots, you're probably familiar with the whole FPV goggles and dealing with the really annoying battery pack that doesn't fit very well in the strap. It's not very comfortable and it's really annoying to charge. And also the battery life might not be very good, so you have to worry about, will my goggles last all day because I ran out of battery. And the thing with these annoying battery packs is they don't really come with any adapters to charge it, so I had to go buy one of these things online. Of course you can make one yourself, and you might lose the balance plug lead that comes with this. This is the Orqa FPV goggles, but with Fat Sharks they've had it in the past where they're removable or they break easily. I think now they just ship with it no batteries, and you have to put your own 18650 cells and use a special charger for those. Well, this is all complicated stuff, and I have a better solution that you don't have to deal with all this extra headaches. So what I did is I created a really cool voltage regulator thing that attaches to an XT60 plug, and I just found an extra DC barrel jack that I pulled from a little wall adapter. Of course, you should have a bunch of these laying around for other things. Just rip the cable off of it and you solder it to an XT60 connector that goes through a voltage regulator, and your goggles are powered. So with this special regulator, I can connect up to a 6S LiPo battery and get a nice 9-volt power to power the goggles. And with Orqa FPV goggles, they only accept up to 10-volt input, while Fat Sharks take 13 volts. So 9 volts is a sweet spot, and it doesn't require too much power. This regulator can do about 1 to 1.5 amps continuous before it could burn out. So it works really well. It's compact. And if you have DJI goggles, I don't know if that would work because I think DJI goggles use more power, so you have to put a beefier regulator on there. So it's pretty simple, you just plug it into your battery pack and you just connect it to your goggles like this, and then you have power. You can buy special cables that have a bunch of unnecessary features to power your goggles up, but I find those really expensive and just unnecessary complex, and more things are there just to have them break. Like, I don't need an LCD screen, I don't need this thing on here, I just need a way to power my goggles. The only thing with this method is if you don't have the newer goggles, how are you going to power the fans? But the fan is powered off the main battery, as well as the new, I guess the Fat Shark HDO2s have, they don't use a battery to power the fan. But you can get creative and do that, but this is just a simple way to avoid using the battery pack to power up the goggles. So I'm going to show you how I made this thing and what the equipment and everything is to build it. Alrighty, I have in front of me everything that you're going to need in order to make the power cable assembly for the goggles. So right here we have the DC cable harness, and the dimensions and specs for the DC jack is 10mm in length. You can go with a little bit longer, but it's just going to stick out more from the goggles. And it's the outer diameter is 5.5mm and inner diameter is 2.1mm. And we can just measure or just check against the battery pack that comes with the goggles. So you see these are identical. Again, if you go with a little bit too long, such as this one, then it's going to stick out from the goggles. And you can find these cables and everything like that from a spare wall adapter, or you can just buy this online. So I just ripped this one from an old wall adapter I don't use anymore. Of course, you're going to need the Micro BEC. This is the Matek one I recommend using. It's very small, and then it has a 5 and 9 volt adjustable output, and you can adjust that by bridging these two pads right here. And it has a 1.5 amp continuous, so it's probably about 1 amp or something, but the goggles don't use that much power anyway, so this is perfectly suitable. And then also 6S input, so wide voltage range input. And we have some hookup wire. This is 28 gauge wire, so that'll be perfect for connecting on the input side. And again, the output on this is going to be the DC jack, because you want the 6S or your battery converting, stepping down the voltage to 9 volts. And then just some tools and then some sandpaper and an XT60 male connector. So first thing we need to do is that we need to sand a little bit of the sharp edges off the voltage regulator. So this actually comes in a pack of 3, so you get 2 more chances to redo if you happen to screw up the thing. Pretty rare although, but it comes panelized, so you're gonna need to get rid of any sharp edges. So just like this, just a couple passes, and just to make everything nice and smooth. Okay, so let's take a look at the back of the regulator. So we have our top side, which is our 5/9 volt output. And then we have our 2 grounds, and then we have our 6 to 30 volt input. So these two right here is going to be where you connect your battery, and then you're going to connect the top to the barrel jack. So like that. So before we start, we need to determine the polarity of this. So usually in industry standard is that the center part is positive and the outside is negative. And I can confirm that with using a multimeter, and we can check with our existing battery pack. Sometimes it's reversed, but it's pretty rare. But it's always just good to double check. So we have our multimeter set, and then we're gonna just connect these 2 probes right here, and we'll give a value. So hold this probe out there and then carefully insert the probe in the middle. And we see that the readout is 7.45 volts. So confirms that the center part is positive. And then for here, let's check the polarity of this cable harness. And yeah, so the stripe line usually refers to the center for the barrel jack, and then the non-striped is for the outer side. So we put the multimeter in continuity mode, so you'll hear the little beep. So here we go. We will touch the outside right here. Oops. And then we'll just bridge the connectors together. So test for the outside. Alright, so we're good. Check the inside just for good measure. So stripe side. Yeah, so we are good. Okay, so the next step we need to do is we need to tin the leads of the wires and prep the surface for of the regulator. So tin these, and then what we'll do after that is we're going to connect after we've tinned this, we're going to connect this with some super glue to the XT60 connector. So you don't want your iron too hot, otherwise you're going to melt through or damage the component. So I usually set mine to like 750 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's not too hot and it works quite well. Alright, so we have the pads tinned and everything like that. So now we are ready to attach this to the XT60 connector. So we'll just use a small drop of super glue, and then we are going to mount it like this. So we have our positive side, which is the flat side, and then our negative side, which is the cornered edge right here. So we want to match it, the input, which is positive, to this side right here. So it'll make it easier when it comes to wiring. Less wires crisscrossing. So here we go. See, just put a little small drop. Again, you don't need too much, just because we're going to use some shrink tubing and some hot glue to help secure it down the road. Okay, so we want to make sure this is nice and lined up and straight. And if you haven't already, you're going to want to tin these wires. So these are the input wires, and of course the power plug connector. So these are tinned as well. You don't need too much wires exposed, just a little bit, because these are actually pretty thin pads. So you can do that while the glue is drying. And of course, we need to enable 9-volt output. So all we have to do is we just need to bridge these two pads right here with some solder. So let's take care of that right now. All right, so the pad is bridged, so we are ready to go. So again, the center part is negative, and those are actually shared, so the two grounds, and the outside is positive. So let's solder the grounds together because it's this metal part, so it's the hardest to do, and then we can do the outside afterward. So now we have the wires soldered, so we are going to connect the input wires to the XT60 connector. And this part's pretty easy. So first thing we need to do is we need to rotate these plugs towards the wires right here, so it'll make it easier to solder. So we'll take some needle nose pliers and just rotate it just a little bit. Here's the positive lead right here, and then we're going to rotate the negative lead towards the black wire. So now what we're going to do is that we will cut this wire probably about this length, and then we're going to strip the ends a little bit, and then we're going to tin it. Then we're going to stick the tinned lead into here, and then we'll fill it up with some solder, and that will be our connection. Okay, everything is nicely soldered and wired up, so we are ready to go test this. So we have a multimeter. We need to make sure that the output is 9 volts. If it's not, then we need to reevaluate what was wired up incorrectly, or maybe the regulator is damaged. So we have our battery right here. We're gonna connect it. Hear a little spark go on inside just because it's the regulator doing its stuff. It's not too big of a deal. This is a 5-cell battery, just to let you guys know. Then we are going to test the voltage and the polarity of this. So the outside needs to be negative and the inside needs to be positive. Okay, so we see clearly that we have 9 volts and the polarity is correct on here. So everything was wired up correctly and we are good to go. Okay, so the next steps, because we're not done yet, is we need to put some hot glue and some shrink wrap over this to help support the power cable wire. Otherwise it's going to get damaged when we keep pulling this off and on from the battery lead. So pull this off very gently, and then let's get some shrink wrap over this part. We'll do a smaller shrink wrap right here, and then we'll fill it up with some hot glue, and that will be pretty much it. Here's the completed product. As you see, a couple different types of shrink tubing. So there's a one that went over the voltage regulator and the XT60 connector. Then I put a smaller one that went over the barrel jack, threaded all the way down here. I used some pliers to make things a little bit bigger. and then use the heat gun to shrink it down, and then I use another little bit smaller piece of shrink tubing, stretch it out, and cover it over all the shrink tubing just to add a little bit more strength. So here, very strong, has a little bit of hot glue inside just to add more strength. And of course, let's go test it out to make sure that it still works, the heat didn't damage it. Okay, so the voltage is good. Now we can power up some goggles. Go. Okay, so there you go. You clearly see the goggles are working. Works perfectly. And now I have a working solution where I don't have to worry about the battery pack on the side right here. I can just use one of these packs, or I can use a really big pack and have the ability to quickly charge and all day flying. So it's super nice to have. Hope you found the video was helpful. It's pretty straightforward and not too hard to do. Pretty ingenious that you can get something that this small to power up your goggles and not really have to worry about it. So much cheaper, just works, simple. So there you go. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know. And as always, have a nice day.